कृपा करो महाराज मोइनुद्दीन कृपा करो महाराज मोइनुद्दीन कृपा करो महाराज तुमरी दया की खबरिया तुम्हारी दया की तुम्हारी दया की दया की तुम्हारी दया की सुन के खबरिया आन परी अजमेर नगरिया शीश नवाब चूम दहरिया जहाँ करो तुम राज मोइनुद्दीन जहाँ करो तुम राज
Sufism is a journey toward the source of life, using love as a vehicle. And I'm using the phrase source of life because other words I might use might be misunderstood. But for us, the source of life is infinitely compassionate, intelligent, generous, beautiful, and is intimately involved with every human life. Strictly speaking, a Sufi is someone who is following a path that began at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was a teaching for an inner circle. Its context is the Quran. Its basic practices are those of Islam. And it has a lineage of enlightened saints, men and women, who have continued that living tradition that began with Muhammad and have an organic relationship to its beginning. An organic relationship which is continually flourishing, adapting itself. It's creative. It's not a tradition that looks toward the past exclusively, but a living tradition that is always adapting to the conditions of contemporary life. In today's world, or in any world, I think the attraction of Sufism is its integration with life. That it's possible to be fully a Sufi while having a livelihood, being of service to humanity, being in marriage, raising a family, taking on these ordinary responsibilities and pleasures while continually remembering God and gradually purifying the heart. The Sufi orders are like branches of a tree, and one branch is not in competition with another. And there's a beautiful coherence among the traditional Sufi orders. I have very dear friends, colleagues, who could come from places as diverse as West Africa, Morocco, Bosnia, Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, not to mention Europe and America. And even though we may be connected to different lineages, we quickly find ourselves on the same page because of this deep coherence in the Sufi tradition. And many of the basic practices are shared. Now the Mevlevis, who stem from Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, one of the great literary figures of all time and a great saint as well, is a spirituality rooted very explicitly in love and beauty. So it's been a refuge for certain kinds of people through the Ottoman era, for instance. Many of the artists, musicians, literary figures of the Ottoman world were Mevlevis. It's a pretty refined approach to the spiritual life. There are also some very down-to-earth approaches to the spiritual life that one could encounter in Sufism, for instance. So very often the Sufi orders suit different temperaments. It's not that we would exclude anybody because we thought their temperament was inappropriate, but people are naturally attracted to where the resonance is right. And I can say that these direct descendants of Rumi are people who have been the product, of these centuries of this cultivation. And I'm always watching them, learning from them, and feeling as if I have a lot to learn as well, in just the kindness and courtesy with which they approach all their relationships. So that's Sufism, too. It's a very embodied spirituality. It's a very relational spirituality. The idea here is that we don't attain spiritual maturity, and that's what we call spiritual development, spiritual maturity. We don't attain it alone. We attain it in synergy with our community. So we need each other. The individual human being is not the ultimate unit of reality. There is a greater whole. So when we talk about oneness, we mean it. On the one hand, individuality is precious. The divine has created billions of individuals. The creative power of the universe must value individuality, and so do we. But there is a deeper self that we can live from, a self that's prior to our thoughts and habitual emotions. Rumi called it I-ness without I. So that I-ness without I is something worth struggling for, worth practicing through contemplation, but also just as much in everyday life. It's one thing to attain it in a deep state of meditation, but in Sufism, we actually don't necessarily spend hours and hours in that kind of spiritual practice. We do practice meditation and contemplation consistently, a bit every day, but we carry that state of heartfulness into every moment of life. And the goal is to be in that part of ourselves that is prior to our thinking mind and reactive emotions and conflicting desires, so that we're living from our essence and being, shall we say, our center of gravity located in the heart. We believe, we experience that there's a kind of guidance that comes to the heart. The heart can be trusted. This is the way of the heart. Sufism is the way of the heart, another definition. And there's nothing greater, nothing more beautiful or satisfying than to be able to live from an awakened heart, a sensitive heart. Because then you're truly in relationship with everything, with people, with your environment, and with spirit. And you enter into the perception of a qualitative universe, a universe of qualities, not just a universe of quantities. Maybe that sounds a little abstract, I don't know. But I mean that it is an extraordinary universe in which the most precious experiences are experiences in the invisible dimension. Friendship, gratitude, or even something as almost intangible as integrity. So cultivating this inner dimension, purifying or filtering out elements of our egoism, meaning our false self, that part that is not very real and is not very smart either, and doesn't contribute much to human life, and in fact causes some harm. Learning to live from a truer self. This is something human. If somebody could prove to me that there is no eternal soul and no God, this would still be a beautiful way of life, on purely human terms. And yet, this physical existence is not the whole story. This life in time is not the end of our true life. So we are accountable. We're in this world of time and space to be tested, to use it as an opportunity to develop, and especially to experience while alive the true dimensions of divine generosity, intelligence, grace, and beauty. Dear world, do not let yourself be divided by sectarianism, politics, race, or gender. We are at a critical point, and it is now or never for humanity to recognize its unity. While there are many forces working against that unity, especially behind the scenes, we must not let ourselves be manipulated by all those forces of division that cause fear and kindle hatred. We must look for the best in each other. We must see the value of different cultures, different religions, and even different approaches within our own religion. And what I'm speaking is not original or merely Sufic. This is also Islam. I believe it is the true framework of Islam as expressed in the Quran. I'm not inventing this. The Quran says, God says, you could have been one people, but you were made into different races, tribes, genders, in order that you might know one another, and in order that you might be as in a race for virtue and learn from one another. So the diversity within humanity and within religions is part of a greater plan. No religion has a monopoly on truth. And this, I believe, also is Islamic and Sufic teaching. And yet, we deeply love our own tradition, the one that has chosen us, and are incredibly grateful for everything that it's brought us, because we couldn't have never asked for this, because we wouldn't have known what to ask for. This is one of our favorite ghazals of Jalaluddin Rumi. The moment that you're with yourself, you're under the clouds of sorrow. And the moment that you are selfless, the moon would come to your side. The moment that you're with yourself, the beloved would depart from you. And the moment that you are selfless, you would taste the beloved's wine. The moment that you are with yourself, you would feel the chill of November. And the moment that you are selfless, winter would blossom like spring. All your restlessness is due to your seeking restfulness. Become a tireless seeker, so that restfulness will come to you. All your displeasure is due to your seeking pleasure. Abandon pleasures, and austerity would become a pleasure to you. All your frustrations are due to your seeking your wishes. If not, all wishes would come to you like offerings. Love all of the beloved's ways, not just her affection, so that the coquettish beloved would come to you as a desperate lover. When Shemsuddin, that great king of the East, arrives in from Tabriz, you would be ashamed by God of the moon and the stars.